everyone, and welcome to This Nintendo Life, episode 233. My name is NVZ, and my name are now on the credits of a video game. It's the only way I can explain to my family members that I do something that they can understand. I brought my grandma upstairs. I was like, "Hey, look, I'm in the credit. You know what a credit sequence is, right? You know, like end of movies, people's names go by. This is the way I have to explain to her." And then she comes upstairs. She's like, "Oh, wow, yeah, your name's in the credits." So that was that's like the easiest way.
It's good because credits are a really good example of something that's similar between TV, films, and games. You know, like it's an easy to understand.
Yeah, exactly. So that was fun. That was cool, and the easiest way I think to explain to old Indian people like how what my job is and what I actually do. So that was pretty fun.
They have no idea what you do, but they do know you're in the credits. So
yes, exactly.
That's something.
That's important. That's important. So the first game that I've worked on fully, The Case of the Golden Idol, is out. It's out on Steam, and people can go buy it. So
getting some great reviews.
Yeah, really good reviews. PC Gamer gave it an 89, which is extremely, extremely cool. And we are also overwhelmingly positive on Steam, which basically means like you have to have 95% of your reviews be positive. And we currently have 2 negative reviews out of 500, which is pretty staggering. Like that almost never happens. So I think people like the game a lot, which is very fun. I'd appreciate it if people went and checked it out. It's on Steam at the moment. Who knows what happens in the future if it comes to consoles or whatever. But
how long is the game?
It's really hard to say because the way I played it like during development, and so I was playing each scenario as it was being made, so they were kind of like not fully formed yet. So I took like an hour on each one, and there's like 12 cases, so I probably took like 10 to 11 hours playing through it like during development basically. But there are people on Steam who are like, this thing's quite short, but anyway, I really liked it, and their playtime is like 3 hours. I'm like, you must be a genius. Like there's a lot of people doing it that quickly, but I think most people between 5 and 6 hours, I would say, and some people who take longer, who find it a bit trickier. 10 hours probably is around where people are at. So I'd highly recommend it. If you like Return of the Obra Dinn, this is like one of the first games to really do something similar to that, and I would say it's more approachable. I personally like it more than Return of the Obra Dinn, but again, you can't take my word because I'm biased because I helped work on the game. But anyway, that's my thoughts on it, and it's out there. So if you want to check it out, it's on Steam. The Case of the Golden Idol. Would appreciate people taking a look. That's exciting. And then we're launching another game in a couple of weeks' time, so I'm sure I'll talk about that when that happens. Very busy at the moment. Bally, how are you doing? How's it going? I haven't even introduced you. I'm joined as always, of course, by Bally. Hi, Bally.
I'm here. Yes, I did tell you I was clearing out my childhood bedroom, which still had or has now had a lot of my video games, and I lined up 4 Game Boys next to each other that I sent you a picture of. I have 4 generations of Game Boys, but that's now 4 Game Boys and 3 consoles. It was my Wii, GameCube, and N64. All they were covered in dust and all sorts of crap, so now they're all wiped down. They're in a box, and they've now got a lid on them, and those boxes of both my consoles and video games.
Have you got all the cables in there as well, and bags and stuff, and labels?
Got the cables, yeah.
Nice.
They're all wiped down, clean, in a sealed box, and they're going into storage until me and Caroline eventually move out of this flat.
Yes, have enough space to actually put all your video game consoles out again.
Exactly. It's a very good feeling that's all sorted.
That's good.
And I messaged you, and you advised me I should keep my CRT until I have a solution as to how to play sort of N64 and GameCube games. So I'm keeping a hold of that.
Yeah, I really I missed our CRT when we got rid of it. The last game, I think I talked about it on the show, but the last game I played before that CRT got thrown away or sent somewhere was Prince of Persia on GameCube. Yeah, and that was a really good experience, like playing it properly on a CRT. And that was, we had a pretty chunky, massive CRT, so it was a good one. And I know yours is more like a smaller kind of square one. It's your bedroom one that we used to play Pokemon Stadium and stuff on. A classic CRT. So I would say like keep that for as long as you can. Before, because I know there's solutions out there. If you go and look or listen to people like Jeff Gersman or people who tinker with like retro stuff all the time, and they have all these weird things that they talk about that I never understand what they're actually talking about. But I'm sure if you pay attention, then you'll figure out what cable you need and what kind of converters you need and stuff like that. So
exactly. Yeah,
one day it'll happen.
Just want that ability to just. Yeah, let's grab an N64 game, play the original Pokemon Snap, Pokemon Stadium, whatever. give it a go. It's
Yeah,
good fun. Yeah,
exactly. And it's, those games were built for those TVs to look that certain way, right? So yeah,
they run really well generally. Like I think we took frame rates for granted back then as well, because a lot of things ran at 60. Like, wasn't it Prince of Persia at 60?
I think so. Yeah. Certain games definitely were. And I think like we didn't have the language to understand that back then, so we were just like, this looks good or this looks bad.
And when all our games transferred to 30, we didn't even bat an eyelid.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Now we do.
Now we do. All too much. But anyway, we're here to talk about the video games, what we've been playing, and other things such as Nintendo and that company who does make the video games. Bally, would you like to tell everybody what our show today is going to be?
Slightly shorter show. Well, I should say will be long, but it's 2 segments. So for the first segment, we're going to talk about the games that we have been playing, and there are a lot of them. And then for the second segment, we're going to do a few of your emails.
Absolutely. And yeah, we're kind of in the season now of new game releases for Nintendo especially, so next couple of shows I'm sure are going to be spicy with some fun stuff. So let's kick things off, Bally, with a brand new release that has come out this week, and we have both had an opportunity to put some time into it. Surprisingly, you more so than me. You're a good 7-ish hours into Mario plus Rabbids Sparks of Hope, with the merge of Rabbid and Luma, which are in fact the sparks of Hope. So Bally, how are you feeling so far about this follow-up to this game that you actually played the first one this year, right?
Yeah, I played it. It must have been like February-ish time, maybe January. I can't remember, but yeah, I really enjoyed the first game, and I'm enjoying this game even more. Like, honestly, I think it looks stronger. I think the worlds are stronger. I think the characters are stronger. I think there's so many like small mechanical things that we can get into that are just improved dramatically, and it all comes together into like one of the best strategy games honestly I've ever played so far.
Wow,
and I'm only 7 hours in, but this thing is really, really good and is honestly a joy to play. That's part of the reason I've already played about 7 hours, is it's really fun, and I'm so happy with how this game's turned out. Like, even stuff like this feels like a lot more Mario-style enemies in the game and stuff like that. There's just a lot more character. As much as characters the first game had, this game just feels even stronger in all those aspects.
Yeah, and it's one of the things that's throwing me off about it that's a little weird is that they now have voice acting, so your little Roomba guy, Beepo.
Like some voice. Oh, there's a lot for the Roomba guy, but everyone else, it's like little bits here and there that are really like, wow, was that a rabbit just speaking to me?
Like Rabbid Luigi is like, hey, it's me, Rabbid Luigi, I'm hanging out, and oh my god, Rabbid Peach is like a valley girl, and like, holy shit, like when she speaks, I lose my goddamn mind, like Jesus Christ. But you're right, like they almost chime in with like 1 or 2 lines at the start of the sentence, and then you have to read the rest, which leads to this really weird thing where Beepo is fully voice acted, and Beepo to me has big C-3PO energy, like that is what that character feels like. It's like
they didn't really have a voice in the first game, but now they do a lot of talking.
Yeah, totally. And they feel like, the panicky mum of the group almost, where they're like, as I said, very C-3PO style, like vibe that comes off of that character. And you still kind of control, it's this weird thing where you're still kind of controlling the Roomba, but now the Roomba is like floating above, so it almost looks like you're controlling the character at the front, but you're not quite. It's been one of those things about the series that I've always found a little bit weird, and sometimes makes it tricky when you're collecting coins and things like that, because my focus is usually on whoever's at the front of my party from a character perspective, but it's actually kind of the Roomba that's leading you.
With the voice acting, there is a line in particular from Rabbid Peach. I think it's when she uses her like heal everyone move, and she says like, time to stream.
Yeah.
And it's like, wow, okay, this is a take.
It really is. I actually, oh man, I think Rabbid Peach has my favorite voice acting so far. I think that it's real stupid, but like, it's also really weird that like we're associating these real, almost human voices with Rabbids now. Like, I had assumed the Rabbids were more akin to Minion in that they just kind of grunted and didn't actually say real words, but now they're just talking English, and I wonder if that's like, oh, they've been in the Mushroom Kingdom long enough, so now they actually know how to talk, but Mario still doesn't talk, so I don't know what's up with that.
The thing I'm learning about this world they're in is that they don't have many rules about like how it all links together. And having said that, I do love the kind of space theme, because it feels weird in 2022 that we're like referencing Mario Galaxy that came out in like 2005, and it's like
'07 I think.
'07. I mean, those vibes are really good for what this game's going for, and kind of hopping from planet to planet, and it gives them a really nice excuse to just do one crazy world into another crazy world. It's a bit more thematic than randomly doing it within the Mushroom Kingdom, perhaps.
Yeah, and I think the thing that I've really liked about the exploration so far is the first game felt like a corridor. You were almost like shuffled down this route and you would do puzzles along the way, but it felt, I would say the best way to describe this versus the first game is the first game feels rigid, where this feels like free and bouncy almost. Like there's a kind of freedom to the movement, there's an openness to the space, there's a flexibility in the combat, like everything just feels a bit more like approachable and like easy to jump into.
There's random enemy encounters.
Yeah, and but just snappy, right? Even the regular fights feel so much faster to get through and just like less laborious, and it's quicker to like switch between characters and the flexibility you have on the fly. But yeah, in terms of the world exploration itself, like because that first game, it almost felt exhausting of like, okay, all right, I'm now blocked by a fight. I have to engage with this fight in order to continue, right?
I did a 3-stage boss last night.
Oh, wow.
Was at the end of the second world. It took me like 20 minutes. Like, it just felt fast.
Yeah.
And, like, this map felt large, but it still just kind of whizzed by. Maybe my strategy is just too good. But it just felt like there were some maps in the first game that I was like, oh god, here we go. And it was like really bullet spongy bosses that just took ages, and oh god, they've stomped me and I need to restart. And I don't know, not that this game's easier, because I do think it's ramped up massively by the end of the second world. But it's just paced in a really nice way.
Yeah, and that's the thing, like having your own control over the pacing of the game for me has really made it stand out, because I tend to like with these sorts of games deciding like, okay, I want to explore for a bit and I want to go around and do the environmental puzzles, and I kind of want to like almost in my head map out the whole space of the world before I start engaging with, you know, what's the next fight I'm going to do, right? I want to almost go around and say like, oh, there's a side fight there, I'm not going to do it right now, but I know it's there now, it's on my map, and I can just keep going around the world like doing the mini puzzles, and then when I feel like it, I'm like, okay, now I'm ready to do a fight, now I can go in and do one, right? And I'm almost like having my own kind of my own pace of the game, which I think is the benefit of this versus the way the first one was structured. And you know, I don't think the puzzles so far have been like mind-blowing or anything crazy, but they're all very kind of easy to engage with and fun, and one of them was there's like a cannon at the beach in the first world, and it's kind of covered by this goo, and you need to find an orb to put inside of it, and I was like trying to look around to find it, and it wasn't kind of obvious where it was, and I was just shaking the trees randomly, and then randomly it just fell out the tree, and I was like, oh, okay, the game is rewarding you for really kind of picking at the environment and really engaging with all the different elements, all the aspects that you can within the space, which is cool. And then it kind of like shoots you over to another island, which lets you get one of those explodey eggs. It does a similar Splatoon thing where there's like goop all over the world, and you kind of have to get rid of the goop by using different elements to kind of like splash it away almost, and so yeah, you take the egg back and you throw it at this big eyeball, and then it kind of disappears, and you can access a hidden route and find a treasure chest and all that sort of stuff. And to be honest, like similar to the first game, the collectibles so far haven't been that interesting to me. Like they're memos, like voice acted memos, and there's also like you know, other random trinkets that you find that I think some of them might be helpful for leveling up characters and stuff, but yeah, it's more for me like the fun of just exploring the world and just mapping it out and just kind of solving the small puzzles there have been. And I'm sure those kind of ramp up and get more interesting as things get further on. Already in the second ice world, you get a power for Beepo, like a sound wave that you can blast, and that seems to interact with certain elements, like certain rocks explode when you use it. So it feels like they're adding, not Metroidvania abilities, but like you're getting like additional traversal stuff or additional like overworld stuff that you can use that makes that side of the game more interesting and engaging generally.
Can I get into some of the mechanical improvements?
Yeah, let's go for the combat stuff, because I think this is kind of the meat of a strategy game like this, and I think they've really done a big number in terms of changes here. So yeah, go ahead.
So maybe my favorite improvement, and maybe it's a small one, but like one frustration I had with the first game was I always was nervous about changing up my party, for the simple reason that you had to keep spending coins to get the best weapon for the character that you used.
Yes.
So if I wanted to suddenly switch from Mario to, say, Yoshi, I'd be like, oh, well, I've not got enough coins to spend on the hottest Yoshi gun, therefore I'll just stick to Mario. And this game just completely removes that from the game. Like there aren't weapons that you buy. There are weapon skins that don't do jack shit. But totally. there aren't like weapons that you have to constantly keep upgrading through coin and the kind of economics of the game. Like you can freely switch character, and that's, I
believe, you had to buy your specials sometimes as well, right? Like improving those also, so there's like a double thing for the first game.
And the likelihood you're going to change character in this game is reinforced by the fact that the skill trees are so flexible that you can pump all your skill points into one aspect of a skill tree, and then just before the next match you can move it all from their special to, say, improving like their movement or something. And you can do that back and forth again every single match. And like the first game, everyone levels up equally. So if you've not used a character in a while, they'll suddenly have a bunch of skill points you can invest in their skill tree. And the menus, there's a lot to take in menu-wise, but I do think it's pretty well laid out where you can adjust your skill trees, you can adjust your characters, and then you've got your Lumas where you're putting all you can invest star bits into your Lumas to upgrade them, and then
Sparks, exactly.
Exactly. Why aren't they not called Rabid Lumas?
I mean, they make that reference at the beginning. Beepo's like, I think they should be called Rabid Lumas, and then Rabid Luigi is like Sparks, and so and then Beepo's like, okay, go ahead, and then we'll call them Sparks.
All of that stuff is quite easy to manipulate.
Yeah, I would say my one issue with the leveling up is how you have to kind of go into a character, then into their skill tree, then press A, then press B to get back. Then there's no easy way to flip between characters when you're in the skill tree menu.
You could easily miss their skill tree if you're new to the game and didn't really know that the skill trees were there. I don't think the game does a good job of saying, make sure you invest in your skill tree, because it is actually really important.
It's just for me, it's just a bit of a slow process every time, because you, especially at the beginning of the game, you're getting skill points quite quickly, and so after every fight, you're like, okay, go in, slowly do every character individually. It's nice that they have an auto option, so I have done the auto option for some of the characters I haven't been using as much, just for the moment, and then obviously I can go back in and tweak it to my own desire later on. But I will say at the beginning, it just felt not overwhelming, but it was just a bit too slow of a process when I just kind of wanted to get back into the fights and stuff like that.
It's made slower by the fact that as much as this game is getting all the juice out of the Switch in terms of visuals, and it runs really well and that looks amazing, there are still those like loading times to get to like menus and swapping between different menus, and you do really feel it, the amount that you are going into these skill trees and adjusting your sparks and these sorts of things. It does make you be like, oh, if I see this loading screen one more time, like at points, like you get used to it.
Yeah, I haven't been too bothered by it. I don't know, maybe because I don't play on the next gen consoles that much. My PC loads things very fast, but I don't know, maybe because it's not had a huge issue on me. But I can totally see for a lot of people who have kind of got used to no load times anymore on consoles, especially, that it's probably is a little bit annoying. But
I also think the removal of the grid system is quite nice. I think the ability to freely run around sort of within your circle, and it's much easier to link up the movement areas of characters in order to like use jumps to get to the next area. And the fact that you now jump and then glide into a space I quite like it, because it kind of one of my characters glided into the wrong space, and I was like, oh damn, like that I should have glided over there and I've gone over here, and it kind of wrecked me a little bit. And it's nice that there's a small amount of skill required just to make sure you go into the right area. And, I like it. I think it's a good change.
Yeah, it adds a lot more of a tactical layer in terms of it's just less frustrating, and I think because the thing that you know is like, okay, as soon as I shoot my weapon, then I can't move anymore. But before then, I can do all these other things. I can use my special. I can use my spark ability, right? Like, you have action points, or you can dash, right, as well, or use team jump. So having all these abilities per turn, and you're like, okay, how can I get the most out of this turn before being able to do, this the thing where I kind of lock myself in with an attack, you can be like, okay, well, I need to get that character over there. Let me bring my other character closer towards them, right to the edge of their circle, so that they can initiate a team jump, so I can get that character over there, and then that other character can still move afterwards. And obviously, after you've team jumped, you have kind of a small circle you can move within, so you really do have to be careful, as you said, of like where you're going to land. But that flexibility for me has been really, really helpful, and I think it picks up on one of those frustrations with tactics games of like, oh, I made a mistake here and I can't press the back button, and there's no undo here either. But I think because the flexibility it provides you, you're gonna fall into those situations where you mess up far less so because of it, right? Which is good.
I think mechanically the game is also stronger in terms of, I think they just really made sure that stuff like lines of sight and stuff all feel a lot more clear. There were a few areas in the first game where you could literally like clip through blocks and other enemies sometimes, and your bullet would then go on to your desired location, whereas this game makes it very clear, nope, your bullet's going to hit this exact wall and therefore you can't attack. And they kind of get around it a little bit because with one of Luigi's specials, this is like Overwatch ability, and there's an upgrade on that Overwatch ability that allows you to like shoot. It's called like ghost bullets, or I can't remember what it's called. And it allows you to like shoot through things, basically.
Wow.
So they're making a point of, yes, we have improved the lines of sight, but if you want to still be jammy, you can use this ability. So I've definitely got that one on Luigi, and
that sounds really good because Luigi is super good.
Luigi remains my favorite character in this series because I loved him in the first game, and he's made. What I love about him in this game is, first, they've given him a bow instead of a gun, which is just great.
Yeah.
But what's cool about the bow now is that because Luigi's good at sniping, they reward you for being good at sniping by making his arrows do more damage the further away you are from an enemy.
Yes.
So if you're up close, it'll do less damage. So it's encouraging you to actually use Luigi as a sniper, which I love. And I must admit,
which also like adds in tactical ability, because then you're like, well, I have one less character to use a jump with. If your other character's like further up ahead in the field, then you have to make that decision of like, well, I'm going to keep Luigi back. I have less options here for movement, but he will do a lot more damage. So I think it trades off really nicely in that way.
Totally. And I will admit, so far, especially in the second world, because there's a lot of sniping enemies, I'm using my team from the first game, which is Mario, Luigi, and Rabbids Peach.
They're pretty solid, yeah.
They're really solid. It's a little bit of a shame that Rabbids Peach is the only character so far, and I've unlocked 2 characters who has any healing abilities.
Yeah.
Like, they've completely taken away. So Peach used to have this ability where she'd jump in, and then she'd have an area of effect heal whenever she jumped in on an area. And she now doesn't have any healing abilities. She just literally blocks attacks. So instead of having a healer, you can just have a character who literally blocks attacks. I personally like the healing character because I just like, especially for the longer matches, I feel it gives you a bit more flexibility. So I think Rabbids Peach is going to be a bit of a mainstay in my team.
I've been switching it around. I think like Rabbids Peach for me is like, if I don't want to spend coins on healing, then I'll get into a quick match and just use her at the start to heal. And
coins are a dime a dozen already where I am in the game. So I was doing that originally as well because I was like, I don't want to spend coins on healing. I've got enough coins where I could just heal in between every match. So that's a good reason to switch out Rabbids Peach, because I just got a character who I don't want to spoil, who is like, wow, you have 2 abilities that I don't think I can now do without. Because this is the shit. Like, this is awesome. So good.
Yeah, totally.
So I might have to use that character. I can never drop Luigi, and I might have to drop Luigi at some point, but like I said, the second world has a lot of snipers attacking you, so it's good to retaliate with your own sniper.
I've generally been switching characters around quite a lot, you know, like Rabbids Mario is actually pretty fucking brutal. You know, he has like a circular range of his kind of fist gloves that he has, but they don't have to be up close melee. Like you can still hit them within a range, and he can hit characters who are higher verticality than him, right? Like if a character is up on a ledge and he's like down below, he can do that and he still does damage to them even if they're behind a block. I was like, holy shit, this is crazy. Obviously his range is like shorter than other characters, but he has like a lot of reach when it comes to that sort of stuff, which is cool.
It really just depends on the enemies in the level. Because it was like, I do want to make an effort to like mix it up more, and I do love Mario and Luigi's Overwatch abilities. They are so good, and I've just upgraded Mario's where he can do like multiple in one thing, and he's now got like the double guns that are so good as well.
Yeah, the double guns is a nice change because you can like ping off. It was I think frustrating in the first game where you had to waste a shot on like a weak enemy, but with Mario you can almost really get rid of one of those weak enemies, but still do damage to another enemy who has more HP.
But you're right, like. Rabbid Mario has some fantastic moves. I think Peach has some really cool moves, just like literally blocking attacks, and then her like she has a gumbrella, which is very fun. Like it does more damage the the closer they are.
I think closer, right? It's more like a shotgun.
Closer. Yeah, and that's again kind of like she's got this arc, this cone that she can has the range on that one. So yeah, it's cool.
Rabbid Luigi has been kind of like interesting. He's got the boomerang, which can go through multiple targets, and it's a little weaker, but it's good for like chip damage almost. So I've used him a bit, but like maybe the least of all the characters so far. So hopefully he gets some good upgrades.
And there's no characters that can do like multiple slides. The only thing you can do is line up two enemies, like if they're already in a line, and you can slide through both of them, but you can't like do because I think that was like Rabbid Luigi's special not special, but one of his moves in the first game was he could just like slide, attack like 4 or 5 characters within this close vicinity, and then start shooting.
Well, Bally, I think you've not gone into the skill tree for a certain character, because I think I can say Edge. Edge is a character who's been shown in the marketing anyway. Edge does get multiple dashes. I have multiple dashes with Edge.
Okay.
So yes, you can, if you go into their specific unique talent right in the tree, then sometimes you have those abilities.
But it's just him.
I think Edge is a girl, but yeah. So she does get multiple dashes as an option in the skill tree, and I don't know if anyone else will get that or if that'll just be exclusive to her character. But yeah, she does have the multiple dashes, which has been really helpful. And I was gonna say, like, so far for me, I felt like the game's pretty easy, like generally like much easier than the first game from what I've played so far. And I think part of it is the kind of smaller levels, but like even the first boss was like the end of the first kind of world is like a bunch of eyeballs around this volcano, and you're like kind of just taking out enemies slowly as you go past. And I never had an issue with it. It was like very, very easy, no problem whatsoever. So as you've said, it seems like it ramps up later, but there are certain fights, certain optional fights, because I spent a bit more time in the first world before moving on and doing some of the extra stuff, and there is some stuff in there that does get real tricky. So there's one, I don't know if you come across the pot-headed Goombas yet.
I did. That's the only time I've had a game like a wipeout was the Goombas.
Yeah, it's tricky. So there was a match that was level 10. I had level 9 characters. I went into it, and you are surrounded by these pot-headed Goombas, and basically the deal with them is they can't die. The only way to kill them is to dash into them so they fall on their head, and then you pick them up and you literally throw them off the stage. You throw them out of bounds. And so it was this level where there's like 20 of these dudes plus 4 rabbits, and I'm like, oh shit, here we go. And it was really fun to like tactically think around, like, okay, well, Edge has 2 dashes, which is probably the thing that would have helped you in that level if you'd had Edge available.
That's a good idea.
Because then you can dash through multiple Goomba rows twice, so then you can pick up like 6 Goombas after one turn and just throw them all off the edge. And it's just it's a case of just managing your resources and like your health and everything, because those Goombas, if they run into it, they have a really long range where they can move, and if they hit your character, they do like half your health, like 300 damage per hit, which is really, really brutal. So it was just a case of like, okay, they're all coming from that side, I'm going to move all my characters up to the top on this side. Then the spawners came where I was, and I was like, oh shit, I need to move back away from those because the spawners are getting more Goombas, and they did them from the other side, and it was this, you have to survive for 6 turns basically. And it's definitely the hardest map that I've done so far, but it was also the most satisfying when it came down to the challenge of it. So I really appreciate that stuff is in there, and if you do want the harder difficulty, you can bump up the difficulty, of course, which I might end up doing. It depends how hard things get.
I'd be surprised if you do bump up, because I'd say by the end of World 2, and I've not had any game overs with World 2, I just had that one with the Goombas, but like more so than the first game, it feels like the strategy, at least in near the end of World 2, it's like, right, we're going to use items that get your characters out of cover, and then we're just going to kick the shit into them. And and what I mean by that is like you can go from like full health to dead in a turn, because the first character used a move that gets your character out of cover, and then they're exposed, and then everyone just swarms on you basically.
Damn, okay.
So it's one of those things where it's like, oh, my characters are full health, I'm feeling really confident about this next turn, and then actually a lot of the enemies can hit incredibly hard, and even if you've got 1,000 HP, you can be wiped out in a turn because they hit hard. Like everyone feels a bit more glass cannon-y, I'd argue, than the first game. It's not like it doesn't feel like your characters can take a ton of hits as high as their HP might seem. So I imagine that this third world will be pretty tricky, but it's good fun. It is on the easy side so far, but it's gotten a little trickier, and I'm gonna try and crutch less on Mario and Luigi and Rabbid Peach because they're just so awesome. But I think there'll be a much slower, bulkier, harder hitting enemies that I'll probably need like Rabid Mario 4 just to get that bit of extra oomph, because that's the one downside of Mario and Luigi is they're really good. I think there's characters in the game that hit a lot harder than they do.
Yeah, definitely. Like they have flexibility and range, but like there's trade-offs when it comes to that, right? In terms of damage done.
Totally. And I think the game is really well balanced in that sense. Like I don't think any one character is necessarily better than another character. Like they all have their unique times to be used, a bit like Overwatch or something. You know?
Yeah, totally. And it's so nice to just be able to switch them whenever. And then the other nice thing is that the game sometimes, I don't know if you ran into this fight as well, there was a fight where it forced me to use, I think, Peach and Rabid Mario in a match.
Which is really nice, just to force you to try out these characters, because it makes you go, oh, actually, this move is really cool. I guess I'll try this character out in my next regular match.
Exactly. And it also it allows them to design around those specific characters, right? So like they can create situations and enemies that are either tricky or like easy for those characters to deal with, so that you almost use it like a learning tool to be like, oh, I see how I should use Peach and Rabbid Mario in these specific situations because of this ability and that sort of thing, right? I think it's really, really cool. And we haven't talked much about the sparks themselves and their abilities, but they're basically just like, they're almost like an item that you assign to characters, and you can switch between them, you can level them up, but they give you different kind of perks, different bonuses in fights. So the fire one will turn your attacks to fire, and there are certain enemies that are weak or resistant to these types of things. So at the start of a match, you can kind of zoom around with Beepo and take a look and see like, what is this enemy weak to, what are they resistant to, and then you might want to change out your sparks depending on that fight. So like I've just come across these big guys with the thwomps on their back who are similar to the big stone slab dudes from the first game, and they are weak to the ooze ability. So I gave Peach the ooze spark, and that basically bursts out a bunch of poison damage in a spread area, and so I just got like in the middle of a bunch of those dudes and just popped that ability, and that's not even a regular attack, so that's just a bonus bit of damage that I'm able to do that turn, and then use her kind of main attack to finish them off. So I think that's been helpful so far, and I'm sure that will become more important as things get harder, is like using those spark abilities in order to get past certain weaknesses to make enemies easier to kill and stuff.
And they do something else with the spark abilities I'm not sure if you're aware of.
No, but I don't know yet.
I won't spoil that, which is cool. And I think that it's really clearly like telegraphed to you as the player, like you've got two actions, and using a spark ability uses one action. So it's like, I think all that stuff on just being clear about how the systems work is just a real step up from the first game. As simple as the first game was, I think this game is a lot more stuff in this. I think the sparks had a lot of layers, honestly, but it works well. I think they've done a really good job of just making it clear to the player what you can and can't do.
Yeah, and I think we've mentioned it briefly, but this game looks really good. Like, they've done such a great job visually of making it stand out, and kind of, a game that's in 2022 on the Switch. We're kind of getting to this point where we're like, oh, can we have a new console now? Like, things are getting a little long in the tooth, but, even at a 30 FPS game, it runs really smoothly. It just looks really sharp and nice. All the cutscenes are gorgeous. Like, everything feels very, very kind of like easy to interact with and nice, especially in combat, and the overworld as well. It all just feels of a piece and well put together, and the music's been great as well. Like, I think presentationally this game is really elevating that first game. As I said, like, the first game, going back to it this year, because I played the Donkey Kong DLC at the start of this year as well, like close to when you were playing the first game, and there were things about it that I'm like, yeah, this is a 2017 Switch game, right? You can tell, like, there are certain like little things that make it feel a little bit like it's in a box almost, and this feels like it's kind of like broken free of those chains, and is freer and kind of like bouncier and richer for it, I think, which is really good. So yeah, I'm looking forward to playing a bunch more of this, and I don't think it's super long. I think it's like 20 hours probably.
Okay, I think I'm at the start of the third world, and I think I'm like 37.8% in.
Okay,
so I imagine 20 hours, 21 hours.
Yeah, that makes sense. And again, it depends on how hard it gets towards the end, and if they increase the size of the worlds and stuff like that. But
and you know what? There's a lot of items. There's a lot of different characters. There's a lot of ways you can retool your skill trees. You can turn down the difficulty. Like, if the game throws a ridiculously hard final boss at the end, I'm not worried about using those array of different things to just get through it. Because I think that's one of these things with this type of game is you just don't. You want a challenge, but you don't want it to just completely stomp you to the point where you put the game down without beating it. And
exactly.
They give you so many different options to make all those things easier if you want them.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, nice accessibility stuff there, which is great. And I'm looking forward to digging deeper into Sparks of Hope soon to play more and to get deeper into it. So awesome, Bally. We're getting close to the end of the year here, and we have made good on our promise for our
game trade games.
Yeah, game trade, which if you don't know, game trade is a thing that we do annually where Bally and I give each other a game that we haven't played, and we say, you have to finish this year. There is no excuses. You must do it. It's got to be done. And it's a good way to for us to be because there's always games that I'm like, oh, Bally, you should play this. And you're like, yeah, I'll get to it. And, then it's 3 years later and 3 years later you play Dead Cells.
Yeah, and it never happens. So last couple of years I've played Ace Attorney and
I can't remember.
What was the other one? And I made you play Okami and what's it called? Rhythm Heaven.
Rhythm Heaven, yes. Yeah.
What's the other one I played? Ace Attorney and something else.
Can't remember. Yeah. Ding! Hello, Editing NBZ here to let you all know that the game that I gave Bally that everyone forgot about, but shouldn't because it's the greatest game of all time, Codename Steam. So good. It's incredible. If you've not played it, get on your 3DS before the eShop goes and buy it because it's the best game ever made. Anyway, that was it. Codename Steam. Back to the show. Bing!
Yeah,
I have no idea, but we've done a few years in a row now, and usually we've got those kind of finished early in the year, but obviously Bally had a child this year, so that made that harder. I was just playing a bunch of other stuff, and I was like, I'll get to mine eventually. But finally, we're here. We lined it up for the same episode. Look at that, beautiful timing. So Bally, I tasked you with playing Bayonetta 2 because I was like, Bayonetta 3 is coming out this year probably. You should probably play that beforehand, and you have chosen the last minute possible to play Bayonetta 2 right before 3 comes out. Obviously, we'll talk about 3 next episode because I'll be playing that for sure. But Bally, I'm interested. Will you be playing Bayonetta 3 after playing Bayonetta 2? I'd love to know your thoughts on this game.
So I tried the Bayonetta 2 demo before the game came out, way back in 2014. Yeah. So, and I really bounced off that demo, and that demo was actually something that made you really want to try this game, having not been that interested before at all.
Totally.
I'm not going to be buying Bayonetta 3.
Okay.
I found this game. I found the characters, the story, the locations, the writing, all of that was basically dead to me. It sounds really harsh, but
look, I have the same opinion, and I fucking love this game. Right?
That's interesting. That's interesting because for me, mechanically, it's good fun. The combat does feel good. It at times I was like, okay, I'm just doing the same thing again and again and again, and it's a very one-note game in some ways where it's all about spectacle and fighting, and that's it. There's not that kind of extra. Okay, and now we're gonna. It doesn't feel like there's enough changes of pace and these kinds of things. And if I'm not into the characters, the setting, or the story at all, I do personally find that I can't think of another game where the mechanics have completely pulled up a game for me in my head. I don't know if you can think of examples.
Yeah, you definitely lean more in that direction than I do. I'm totally fine to have something that is purely if I like this and how it plays, I'm totally fine to just do that and ignore the rest of it.
And I was thinking maybe something like Ollie Ollie World, but then again,
Yeah.
I like that game a lot more than the other Ollie Ollies because they like changed the structure and the world and the design. And obviously there's no like story as such, but
Sure.
I like the way that game, and that's a weird comparison, but I just couldn't get into this game in that sense. And yes, the fighting felt good, and I did have fun with the fighting. I started the game on normal and on easy, and I played the first couple of levels. And I was like, I'm not. Not only am I doing well, like I'm not actually taking any damage whatsoever.
Right, yeah,
like this is silly. So I upped it to normal, and then I did like 2, 3, 4 more chapters on normal, and it felt good. Like I think I was worried about like, so when you die, it says like continue. I'm like, right, I need to Google other like a limited number of continues because I do not want to replay these levels. And turns out you can have an infinite number of continues. You just get a lower and lower score, and I didn't really care about the score because I'm just here to play the game. So I was happy on normal for a while, and the game is well checkpointed where even on longer boss fights, if you die, you will restart at that point in the boss fight, not necessarily the start of the boss fight. So I think the checkpointing is good.
And there's no live system, right? I believe. Or
there's no live system. No, it's just like continues, and then the more continues you do, the lower your score. I think even if you have one continue, you get like what's called like a stone medal or a stone.
Oh right,
it goes
you
from
just
like,
do really bad. You don't get pure
double platinum,
Yeah.
gold, silver, bronze, and then stone. So stone means you're not
you're
doing
shit,
great. You're
basically.
So I was playing on normal for a while, but then I had the fear that because you can't change the difficulty mid level, you would have to restart the level on a different difficulty, and these levels aren't too long, to be honest. I think most of them are like 15 minutes, the longer ones are 20, 25 minutes, and that's a good length. But I got worried, I got nervous that oh god, I'm going to get to some boss, and I'm pretty confident this would have been the case. I'm going to get to some boss where I literally can't get through this phase, and I will have to restart the whole level, and I wasn't very keen on that. So eventually I switched back to easy, and that was, I just think that you don't get any, it feels like there are almost no health pickups on normal, and I felt like generally I just wanted a sliding scale for difficulty, or just a difficulty that's between easy and normal, because I feel like the step up is so stark, and it feels like you're getting health pickups all over the place on easy, let alone the fact that you're barely dropping health even on the harder bosses.
Right.
So it felt like I just wanted a little more of a helping hand on normal, and I probably would have played it on normal. Having said that, it's a very tough game later on for sure.
Yeah, it's really hard, I think, with games like this where they just don't find the right balance. Like, easy is too easy, normal is too hard, and there needs to be like a 0.5 in the middle of them that's like, it's just right, you know? It's like, this is the temperature of porridge I want.
Yeah, and I think normal in its defense said at the start, if you've played character action games before, this is your difficulty. And I've not really played them before.
No,
in that sense. So I thought, well, I'm already taking a gamble going with this difficulty. So by the game's definition, I should have been an easy player anyway. So
yeah,
I will defend the game in that sense for sure. And yeah, like it is good. Like the dodging and the witch time and then the countering. I must admit that I didn't really learn combos in the traditional sense. I definitely just did a lot of, it was all about the dodge. It was all about dodging at the right time.
Which time is like the thing you should lean into in that game, right? Like it's about getting the perfect dodge.
Because then it builds up your Umbran witch meter or whatever.
You do your mad crazy shit. You do your like cute quick time events and stuff like that. Yeah. Right.
And so it was all about the dodge and building up that meter for me. And actually the moves themselves, I was basically button mashing between punches and kicks and all sorts, and that's fine. Like that's kind of how it that's how the game flows. Yes, you can learn it, but you can also play it at a level where it's all about the dodge and just getting those hits, and which is how I was playing it. But
I guess it sounds like for you the kind of stuff around that, which is like visually and musically and spectacle, didn't bring it up enough to kind of like make that satisfying.
The spectacle is there. I will defend that. Like there is spectacle. There is a nice crescendo in music, and the music and the look and the feel, it all comes together in a cool way. But it's nothing like enough to bring this game up in my kind of estimations. And
I think that's totally a taste thing, right? Because when I got to those moments when it was just like everything's popping off and shit's going wild, there's kaiju's fighting in the background, I'm just like cackling. I'm just like, this is fucking great. Like, I don't care about the story, I don't care about these characters at all, but I'm punching the shit out of this demon in the sky and things are just exploding and it looks amazing. I'm just like going off on one.
That's because you like anime.
Look, Bally, look, anime is in the eye of the beholder, all right? So yeah.
If I played... I don't think this genre is dead to me. I will say that. I had enough of a good time where it's like, right, if this was a world and characters and story I cared about, maybe like the God of War 1, 2, 3, I don't even know. But maybe another character action game. I think I could get into it. But there was just something about the lack of... It's not even not being grounded. It's like not even knowing what the ground is. Like,
yeah, that's what I fucking love about it. Like, there is no ground. Like, we start in the sky and we only go upwards from there, you know?
Like I don't think a game like Mario Plus Rabbids is that grounded. But it kind of still has different planets. This is the system. This is how you get from one place to the other. This is the vague story that's happening.
You're talking about logic here, Bally, which doesn't apply in this universe.
Bayonetta 2, Bayonetta, that world, it's not... I thought, like, right, we're going to get a really interesting thing. We're going to be in heaven. Then we're going to be in hell. Then we're going to be in the main world. It's like... I can barely remember when we were in any of those three areas.
No, I know.
I don't remember. I don't know why we were underwater for so long. I don't know why we were in like 4 different areas that all claimed to be hell. Then we went back 500 years and then they never jumped forward again from the 500 years. It's like this game just didn't have any respect for my logic or my time or the things that I value in characters and stories in video games. And you know, it's a take. I respect it for its take. It's not my cup of tea. I can totally see why a lot of people really love this game. I would like this game quite a lot if all the characters' story and all that gelled with me a lot more, because I do think there's a lot going for the combat. But yeah, that all of that world stuff is enough to put me off the third game personally. And
that's fair.
I'd rather try another character action game if I was ever going to try again in this genre. But yeah, Bayonetta and we gotta say it, but like the amount of like sexualization and it's not tasteful. It's just not. I don't know.
Bayonetta is an interesting one because I've seen arguments on both sides of the fence for this, right? Like I've seen like the idea that she is a character who owns her sexualization, right? And is but then you look at it from the perspective of like the camera almost controls that, right? So I totally
I'd agree if she was perhaps written by like a team of women who were promoting that. I just feel I'm gonna gamble that it's probably not, and it's probably Japanese men.
It's totally
which I feel uncomfortable about. But,
totally. It's one of those topics that definitely I have seen different and a lot of kind of perspectives on it as well. You know, from different places, and I'm interested to see how it's handled in Bayonetta 3. But she generally, like a lot of people look at Bayonetta as a character who kind of owns that, but like I don't know, again, like you said, who was writing this character.
I agree, she owns it. I'll defend that. I don't know. Even if she does own it, there's like her partner Jean is like just very randomly naked all the time, and and in bathtubs and this sort of thing. And it's like, and I think you're right. I think video games and these sorts of debates have changed a lot, even from 2014. So I'm very interested how Bayonetta 3 handles these things.
Right. I mean, Bayonetta 3 has a mode where, you know, in case your mum walks in the room, she doesn't take her clothes off, right? Like there's the like I can't remember, something angel mode that they've implemented, which is like, hey, when her hair comes off her body, it doesn't show that anymore, and you're fine to play this around family.
Yeah, it's all of this is just not my cup of tea. It just isn't. I respect it. I think that mechanically it's very solid. I had a good time with most of the combat. I do think it was repetitive after a while, but I think that repetition felt a lot stronger when you're so disengaged from the world and the story for me. But I'm glad I tried it. I think it was a good game trade pick. But let's do something other than character action next time.
All right, yeah. No, I mean, I don't...
is my aim.
Yeah, the thing is, like, this genre isn't very well represented on Nintendo generally, so there's not a lot of other ones out there.
I don't think there's a ton of games in the genre. I don't think it's a particularly widespread thing, depending on your definitions. But
totally.
And I know that this is probably one of the best out there, so I'm glad that we started with a really good one of those.
It's kind of the situation with, I think, Castlevania as well, where like I think Bloodstained is one of the best Castlevania games, and you just bounced off it, right? So I think
having had no experience of the genre as well, that's
yes.
a good comparison.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that also same with the kind of Super Castlevania 4. I think it's one of the best kind of traditional Castlevania games, and you also were like, no, this isn't for me. So like I think it's a good idea for you with these genres to start at the top almost, because if you're not going to jive with Bayonetta 2, which I think many consider to be the greatest character action game ever made, then like I don't know that there's a lot of hope for you. I don't know. I would say something like Devil May Cry 5 would be interesting to see your take on, because
I would be interested. I'll be honest, I'm most interested in the God of Wars because I love God of War reboot.
The reboot,
and as much as those games are just hammy and ridiculous, I do feel like, oh, we're actually getting a tour of the Greek gods, and this could be interesting, even if the mechanics on that game might be a bit dated.
Oh, are you talking about the original God of War games on PlayStation, right? PS2.
Pardon?
You're talking about the original PS2 games, right? Yeah, totally. Those games are, I think, will have aged, as I mentioned on our Nintendo show, even worse than Bayonetta, and that kind of, the way they handle women, let's say, is awful.
Why do character action games not like handling women?
I guess they're just all misogynist. It's real rough out there. But yeah, I would say Devil May Cry 5 is a good one to try. It's got 3 different characters who all play very differently. Again, like dumb stuff for me, like Dante like takes his motorcycle and splits it in half and uses it as a weapon. Like that's fucking great. Like, but I don't know if that really works for someone like you who's just like, yeah, okay, I'm just hitting things,
I mean, it's all about context. If I'm already invested in the other things that Dante is doing, then sure, he's allowed to do ridiculous things. It's when I'm already not invested in the world the characters are writing, and then they do ridiculous things. I'm like, okay, fine.
I guess probably not then, because like all these games tend to be very hammy and ridiculous and just not really like characters exist and words are said, but mostly none of it makes sense or it has no cohesion to it. And I'm totally fine with that, right? Like I could not tell you a whit of what happened in Bayonetta 2 except for I beat up a bunch of people, right? And I really agree with you on that point, right? Like the writing I think is bad. I think that the characters are like paper thin and are just like, they're just exuberant kind of caricatures, and
I don't even think they're a million miles away from actually, if they just slowed the pace down just a bit and just tried to explain what was going on, but then that's a very different game probably.
Yeah, that's not what people want. People just want a 1,000 miles per second action ride, and that's exactly what these games provide. And I would say Devil May Cry 5 is definitely a little more reined in, but it's still going to be a similar thing, right? And I am one of those players who, because there's a big audience for these games who are there to play it on the hardest difficulty and learn every combo, and it's almost akin to a fighting game, right? Where you are just like getting expertly good at these games, and they will go for pure platinum runs where they just get hardest difficulty, pure platinum medal on every single fight throughout the whole thing. And I'm sure that's incredible to watch and really, really hard to do, and I'm not there for that at all. I'm here to put it on easy, smack some buttons, have some music and action blare in my eyeballs, and just like enjoy the ride almost. It is like, it's basically like a roller coaster for me, and I think that's the thing that I derive enjoyment from when it comes to these types of experiences. And as we said, like you care much more about story in games, and if something doesn't kind of hold up in that sense, or
it
like
can have a pretty flat, boring story. I just have to at least understand it.
Right. You need some kind of like through line that works. Yeah. And I'm like, just
anything,
whatever.
Anything. I'm not even a high bar. Just something.
Yeah, something to hold on to. And I'm like, yeah, whatever. I'm just gonna go on this. So yeah, I think that totally makes sense, and I respect that for sure. And yes, I'm sure everyone will hear me raving about Bayonetta 3 next week anyway, so I'm looking forward to that.
And you're going to be day one on that game, and you're humming and hawing between easy and normal?
Yeah, I'm kind of going to go with the wind and see where it takes me.
I'll be interested if you can change difficulty mid-level.
Yeah, I don't think that probably will happen, if I'm honest. I think that's probably...
that's partly because of the high score nature, like you were saying.
Yes, exactly.
Because I got a very, like, at the end of the game, it's like, right, here's all the 16 chapters you did, here are your medals, and here are the difficulties you did each level on. And it was like that's my stamp of that's how good I am at this game. So having the ability to change difficulty mid-level would defeat that, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, like, I think they have accessibility stuff in there where it's just like a one button mode where you can just press one button and it just does crazy shit for you. You know, like they have added ways to make this a bit more approachable to people generally. But I think the only character action game that I've played on normal is Astral Chain, which I think was a good level. Like, the final boss was tricky, but I managed to pull through that and make it through. But yeah, I generally kind of play these games on easy because, as I said, I'm just there for things blowing up, really. And that's a fun time.
They certainly blew up. I'll give you that.
They did. Yeah, they certainly do. Awesome. So, my game, Bally, that you gave me was Owlboy, 2016's Owlboy from D-Pad Studios.
There was actually a Metroidvania out there you hadn't played yet.
Yeah. And I think I had my reasons of, like, I don't know, something about Owlboy just seemed a bit off to me. Just the way that you control the character by, like, flying around. It's
not traditional at all.
And you carry these other characters with you, and they shoot the guns, but you're like holding on to them, almost like grabbing them as they. It's just a bit of a weird setup, and they can like disappear.
It's a bit dual stick shooter kind of thing.
Yeah, kind of a combo of that stuff. Yeah. And I think my overall take on Owlboy is it's good. It's okay. It's a decent game, and I don't think it really elevated beyond that for me ever. I think part of that is some of the kind of later level design and certain decisions they make that I think like they have made something that is absolutely gorgeous, right? I would put this up there with Eastward in terms of the best pixel art I've seen in a game. Like those are probably the two best examples.
It's quite a bit older than Eastward as well.
Yeah, exactly, which is even more impressive. The fact it came out in 2016 and even then was one of the best looking games. It's still now one of the best looking pixel art games ever made. I might have a personal preference for the art style of Eastward, but I do think that this is probably the second best looking pixel art game out there, just in terms of sheer density and detail. You look at the trees and it's just like, holy shit, like this is absolutely stunning to look at. So that was the main thing that drew me in. I think they do a great job of like all the areas looking really, really great, and having kind of good variety. It has a weird structure though, and it's like kind of story driven, and there's this whole story about
linear.
These. Yeah, very, very linear. Like there are these pirates and there are the owls and the owl clan, and they made the pirates maybe, but the pirates invaded and they're attacking the town, and then you're defending the town, but then you have to go to a temple to find a thing, and then the boss of the pirates is looking for the third one, and then you go to the... It just feels... The way that it's structured story-wise just felt a little bit strange and not traditional,
yeah,
I would say.
Normally it's like, there's a problem, you need to go to these 3 areas and get the doohickey from each cave and face 3 bosses. You come back and then you do a second phase, and then eventually there's a final boss, and it's not really that at all, is it?
No, it isn't. And yeah, and I think that like there's some interesting stuff the game does. I think the movement is really cool. Obviously, you are an owl boy, and so you have wings, and you can kind of basically fly indefinitely.
You did your like aerial roll when you were around at mine, and you're like, right, this is instantly game of the year, and now I've got to roll.
Yeah, no, that's my thing with games is like if you let me move fast in your game, I'm instantly going to be like, okay, good, tick, box checked. Like with Tinykin, I was like, oh, yep, this soap thing I can slide on everywhere, great. I can just move around as fast as I want. And yeah, you probably saw when I was playing at your house, Bally, I was just like fucking zipping across every screen just as fast as possible, because that's just how I like to move around games like this. And so yeah, the game is nice in that it gives you...
Can I just also say, when we played the co-op game Escape Academy, that's also how you played that game, where you would just barrel into rooms like, we're gonna pick this up, gonna do this, and I'm just like methodically walking very slowly, like, I think we need to go over here. And you're like, I picked this thing up, I've got this. There's just our different game styles. I know. Very easy to see in a game like Escape Academy.
Exactly. It doesn't surprise me that Bally always like takes longer, because and I appreciate it. You're like taking the world in and like really doing it. And I'm like, nope, let me just go over here and pick up this thing. Yeah, totally. So yeah, that's as soon as I got that, I was like, all right, I'm just dashing everywhere. And that's really fun. I like that a lot. And I do like the fact that you're able to hold on to those characters which have the guns and dash at the same time while holding them. I think you get a little bit of a speed penalty by doing that. So if you get rid of them and drop them and just go on your own, you're a bit faster. But yeah, it's nice to have that, and it's just a cool way to move through the world, and kind of like get around obstacles and stuff. But obviously they kind of have to build the level design in a way such that you can't break it in that way, and they have to kind of find ways that it works and doesn't like ruin puzzles or like get you to places where you shouldn't be able to, right? Because if you give the player freedom to fly everywhere, like you then have to kind of build around that. And I think that might be one of the drawbacks in the level design, is that they kind of have to accommodate for it, and so it's a little trickier to make stuff that's a bit more intricate and like platformy, because there's not much platforming in this game because you're able to fly everywhere.
Yeah.
It almost like strips that away. And yeah, I think it's not like a death by 1,000 cuts, but there's just like a lot of little things that just kind of annoyed me, especially towards the end of the game. Stuff like just some of the way that enemies are handled. There's this certain enemy that are these hummingbirds, which they will just like hover midair, and then they will kind of like go into a state where they're about to zoom at you, and then they'll zoom at you, right? And they'll just home in on you. And these enemies, and every enemy in fact, just follow you wherever you go. So even if you go through another screen, they will just still be there following you, and it leads to points where you're basically forced to fight enemies and you're not able to just run away from them. And for me, that's just frustrating in terms of like, there are certain checkpoints where I had to start on an area and I had to get to the other area, and I would just die on the way there and just be like, okay, I just want to get back there quickly, and I couldn't. I would almost be forced to kill these enemies slowly on the way to get back there, and I just don't like that as a way of...
And they'd respawn every time.
Yeah, exactly. I don't like that kind of frustration of being like, well, I was just there and it just didn't checkpoint me properly, so now I have to go through the section that I already meticulously went through and killed everything, but I'm getting punished for rushing through it by like, you know, enemies just following me the whole way there, which, you know, I just find that a little frustrating. And then they kind of pair it with these armor guys, these metal armor guys who walk around and they don't take any damage. There's seemingly no way to kill them. You keep shooting them, and they just constantly spawn these hummingbird dudes. And I was like, oh, these are a pain. And then by accident, I was holding a fruit, so you can pick up fruit in this game and you can use it to restore your health, or you can like throw it around and stuff. I accidentally dropped a fruit on the enemy, and that got rid of their armor. I was like, what the hell? Like, the game didn't teach me this at all. Like, it just kind of, I accidentally my way into it, and I'm like, well, that's not great, because like I just, you know, I was using the most powerful gun with the big guy who has the like flame gun that does a shotgun blast, and
like
none of that was working. Yeah, and none of that was working on them, and then I accidentally drop a fruit on their head, and all of a sudden they're like invulnerable now, and I'm like, okay, well, that's a weird design choice. So like little things like that, where like at least if they taught me that would have been nice, but they kind of just throw these guys in there and almost expect you to stumble your way into that solution, which is just a little frustrating. And I think like some of they have like enemy rooms where it's just, okay, let's just spawn a bunch of enemies in a row for you to fight against, and those just can be annoying of like, okay, because the way the guns work is there's the main guy you have, Geddy, I think, he has like a regular pea shooter gun. Then you have the big pirate dude, and he has a shotgun, but the cooldown on the shotgun is really long, and there's no way throughout the game, at least from what I could find, to reduce that cooldown. So you basically get one shotgun blast, and then you're kind of hanging around for like 5-6 seconds until it resets, and then you can use it again. And in a fast-paced game like this, where enemies are flying at you constantly, it's just not a reliable tool to use. So you're almost always using Geddy to use his P-shot, which is like good, but like it just takes a while to kill enemies. So it's just like this awkward trying to kill them, waiting for your thing to recharge, and then like hoping you don't miss your shotgun shot, because if you miss it, whoops, you're going to have to wait until it resets again, and you kind of lose your chance there. So that certainly happened quite a few times. And then the last character you get is almost a movement ability character, where they can grapple onto grapple hooks, and they can shoot out a P-shoot thing as well. And it's just a little bit, it's okay, but actually that one did help, because that one webs enemies, so it almost like entangles them and makes them ineffective. So that actually did help in the end of the game, kind of going through those previous areas of like, oh, I can just web these guys, and I don't have to kill them, I can just kind of incapacitate them and then just run past them essentially, because there's no XP. It's not a Metroidvania in the sense like Castlevania where you're gaining levels and stuff like that. There's not really any incentive to fight enemies, because enemies don't even give health, which is part of the reason why I was just trying to run past them, because I'm like, there is actually no point to me fighting these, and also I can fly everywhere, so why, like, it's one of those level design things that I just don't think they really figured out, is like there is no incentive to fight enemies in the game, which I think is always a tricky thing for games to figure out, and especially in a game where you can just fly. I just don't think they kind of got there with it, which is frustrating. But I do think that if they can build on this idea, which they're not, they're doing a totally different game now, a kind of trampoline multiplayer thing. I think a second Owlboy
from it.
It's so weird and different, and has been another like 7-8 years since that. I think 6 years now, actually, since 2016, right? So I don't know. I think that they could do a lot of good with a second Owlboy where they kind of like think about some of the design problems and how they can get past them. But yeah, there's just one too many awkward mechanics. Like there are these birds that get set on fire that you kind of use your little with the pirate dude. He has a lighter almost that you can use to burn leaves and you can use to get through areas. But you can set these little weird pelican dudes on fire and they just kind of like bounce along alongside you, and you have to explode them nearby rocks that then will explode if that explosion hits them. And it's this awkward thing of like they follow you behind you, but you want to get them in a position in front of you so you can shoot them so that they get the explosion radius. Just a little awkward, you know? And just some of these ideas, I think it just starts from the base idea of having to hold another character to shoot. It's just awkward in the first place, and so you're almost building a game around that awkwardness to begin with. And like another little thing is, okay, I want to pick up these things from the ground to heal myself. Okay, I'm just going to drop my character and go and pick this thing up. Oh, whoops, that thing's too close, so it thinks I want to pick up my character instead. So I'm like, okay, let's move the character like 5 feet away so that I can then go back to the fruit and pick it up. It's just little things, right? And I don't think in isolation any of these things make the game kind of lesser, but all put together, it just kind of chipped away at it. And like I was enjoying it for like the first 2-3 hours, but then like the end game just kind of ramped up in difficulty and some of the boss fights got frustrating, and just all these little things kind of just added to the point where I was like, you know, I still enjoy playing the game. I still think it's a good game, and it has like great presentation, music, all that sort of stuff is excellent, but mechanically it just wasn't quite there for me, and so it just falls short in a few areas. That it didn't quite work for me.
Like looking back, honestly, I can kind of agree with all your points when I think about the game. I definitely agree, like the first opening hours where you're hit by the music, the visuals, the world, like it's all very really nicely done. But I do agree, like it's a very short game, and when there's enough mechanics that just don't feel spot on, and I've played a ton of Metroidvania since Owlboy that are just mechanically infinitely stronger, and I think that also shapes how I feel, because I agree that like it is just a bit finicky, and then I remember like there being like chase sequences and some tough bosses. And it's the game's asking you to do things without necessarily the tools to do them, and that's always a frustrating disconnect. And I agree that overall this game is a lot more style necessarily than it might be substance, and that can get to you. But I agree, and I'm glad to give it a go. But I think that you're right. I think as impressive as the visuals are, I think mechanically a lot of games have come on since this game. And you know, here's an example of a game that I think handles very similarly to Owlboy, but in a completely different setting. That is a very good Metroidvania that we both enjoyed, is Carrion. Carrion, you're actually flying around it, but doesn't necessarily look like it because of the way that the movement of the meat blob masks the physics in a weird way, but you are actually just flying around. And I think that game mechanically does more stronger with the idea of flying around and just like stealthing up behind enemies or doing this, that, attacking these scientists out from the pipes and things. Like I think that's a stronger way of using like that flying around ability than necessarily picking up characters that then shoot. And it's a very different game, obviously, but like I think there's different ways that it could have been handled, maybe. I don't know. Totally.
I do think both of those games suffer from a similar issue, which is neither of them have a map, and I think both of them could use one, or at least would be a bit helpful, because there was a point middle of way through the game where it was like, go back to your house, and I'm like, I don't even know where that is. Like, you know, I'm like, and there's no indicator on the map. Or
I agree. Even if the majority of players might not need a map, I think even for the players that might need one, because I did want a map in Carrion, and I knew you didn't really mind not having one.
Totally.
But just so that players who might be a little bit put off by where everything is based, because I think knowing where things are in a video game is very much like a skill that it's not necessarily something you have or don't have, but it's something you can definitely improve on the more games you play. Like I think playing Metroidvanias and Zelda style games, like you naturally become better at memorization in terms of locations and this kind of thing. So if Owlboy is your first Metroidvania, you're gonna have a rough time when they say go back to your house or something. So I do think maps are important in games like that.
Totally. I also think, though, there are certain games that like just do a better job of teaching you the space, right? If you think about something like Elden Ring and Breath of the Wild, you could show me a screenshot from either of those games, from anywhere in those games, and how massive they are. I could tell you exactly where you are in that game. Show me a screenshot from Horizon, I have no fucking idea, because it all looks the same, right? Like that's the difference, I think, in terms of world design, where some games really nail it and understand, and like, you know, certain Metroid games for me, like Super Metroid, you can show me, I'm like, oh, I know where that is, right? Versus something like Owlboy, where I'm like, oh, I don't really understand how this is connected together. And I think Carrie and Owlboy are the same in that way, where they don't have maps, but also I think the worlds are kind of, they're generic enough to where they don't really have a space that you can internalize as easily, you know. It's tricky, but yeah, generally I did enjoy it. I think it's a fun game, and I think it's, you know, I think it took me 5 hours ish, so it was on the kind of the quicker side of things, so that's cool, and didn't kind of overstay its welcome. I will say I really did enjoy the last boss fight, because it encourages you to switch between all three of your characters, and you have to like basically break barriers by using each of their different weapons in order to do damage, and I thought that was a good way to bring things all together in the end. But yeah, I'm glad to have played it. So thanks for giving it to me.
I like that the main character, they make a point of the fact he is a mute.
Yes, they do.
Rather than just having a character who's a mute, they actually say he's a mute rather than just go along with it like Link or something, you know. Yeah,
they build a story around it, which is nice. Yeah. I appreciate that. So anyway, I think interesting picks this year. Probably like not, because I think previous years, like at least one of us has been like, yeah, I really like this game. Like Rhythm Heaven for me, I was like, holy shit, this game's incredible, right? So yeah, I think we're less like hot overall on these ones, but I think it's good that we both have the context, especially going into our kind of top 50 games. I think both of these feature somewhere. Maybe Owlboy doesn't, but I think maybe it does somewhere. So yeah, good context for the future and for our discussions. But I think that is going to do us for our first segment. So thanks everybody for listening, but don't go anywhere, because after this break, we are going to be back with some of your emails. See you in a bit.
You awoke me, unleashed the fire in my heart. I will dance and I'll defeat them through the light and the dark. Your mistake was to underestimate my power. Won't let go of the fight till tomorrow's mine. All the night, dancing through the fire around me. I'll never stop. You've been high. Now I'm in the mood for a fight. You won't know what hit you when I spin around with you in my dust. Then bang, bang, down, down again. It's my desire going for the win. Tomorrow is mine. You better run. Don't wait, here I come, no. The fuel in my fire won't run dry. Burns bright, and you better hide. I came for a fight, yeah. Until tomorrow is mine. Don't miss me too much. You awoke.
Hello everyone, and welcome back to the second part of today's show. It's time for your emails. We always put out the call. It works normally. We're putting out the call again. We would like some more emails. The well's not dry, but it's not wet either. It's
We're
kind
not
of
on dry desert, but we're not in snow land. I don't know what the name of that level is in Mario 64. But yeah, we're not on the Penguin Land either. So yeah,
no.
Get us closer to Penguin Land, like in that Mario trailer with those penguins. You know?
Oh, that. I love that. Anyway, if you would like to send an email into the show, please email thisnintendolife@gmail.com. That is thisnintendolife@gmail.com. We would be most grateful. You can also post an email, a comment, a thought into the channel over on our Discord server. We've got a growing community over there. There's a whole channel just for emails, so we'd appreciate one over there if you'd prefer to do that instead of an email, because who opens up their email anymore? But anyway, our first email is from Brad W. It says, 2 quick questions. What are some of your favorite gaming YouTubers / podcasts? And also, are there any Super Nintendo games you're wishing would come to the Nintendo Switch online service? I'm definitely hoping for Chrono Trigger. Not going to hold my breath, though.
Cool.
Podcasts.
I think we've done this multiple times on the show of kind of like
yeah, for those who don't know, we are like, if there's one thing we're bigger enthusiasts in than video games, it's probably listening to podcasts.
Yep. I feel like because I've been very busy recently, the last few months or whatever at work, I just have not had. I used to be able to listen to podcasts while I worked because I did like social stuff, so I'd be like making little Photoshop videos and like images and stuff. I'd be like, perfect, I can just have a podcast on all day literally while I'm working. And recently that's not the case because I don't do that anymore. I'm like doing publishing stuff, which is a lot more involved and lots of meetings and stuff like that. So I have fallen behind on my podcast.
Flying to conventions.
Going to Gamescom, stuff like that, which actually helped because I could listen to it on the plane and stuff. But
oh, that's something. Yeah, you need to get to more conventions then.
Yeah, I need to go to GDC next year. That'll be great. But yeah, basically, I have fallen behind horribly on my podcast, and I think I have like currently 259 unplayed. Average length of the podcast for me is 2 hours, so that's like, I don't know, 500 hours of stuff I'm still behind on. So yeah, it's going well, it's going fine. But you know, here's the thing: you and I, we listen to podcasts constantly, and I think you with Bally Junior, you have had more time to listen to podcasts, I guess, as well, which is
definitely
interesting.
Yeah, just any time that like I'm doing bedtime with him or feeding him, I'll just have a podcast in my ear and I'm just listening. And
yeah.
People will say, "You're not engaged with your son, Val." It's like he's drinking milk. It's totally fine. We're not engaging at that point anyway.
He's a potato. He can't do anything at the moment. So
yeah,
totally.
Yeah, and we should say like, so I'm subbed to like 38 different 48. Sorry, did I say 38 or 48?
Yeah,
no, 48.
Yeah.
That I keep regularly on top of. Now, some of those feeds are dead, and I should also say, I listen to everything on 1.7 speed in order to get. So this is a very foreign concept to people who don't do it. They're like, why on earth would you listen to podcasts sped up? It's like, well, so you can listen to more podcasts, obviously. Like, that's the whole point. I'm sure there's some listeners out there who will also listen to sped up podcasts. Maybe my voice right now is being sped up.
I'm pretty sure that our voice, we just need to speak really fast so the people who are listening on 1.5 times speed even think as much. I can tell the people who speak slowly on podcasts because they sound normal to me on 1.5 times speed. You know,
exactly.
There are certain podcasters who do talk a lot faster, and that's a lot harder to keep up with, but generally I go between 1.5 and 1.7 generally when I listen as well.
The one time I don't listen sped up is when I'm going to bed, and I'll put on a 30-minute timer, and I'll listen on normal speed, and I'll just drift off, and then after 30 minutes my podcast will stop, and it won't play through my entire list of podcasts ready to still go. So yeah, we do like podcasts. That's part of the reason we started the podcast, is we love podcasts.
Yes, exactly. So are there any, Bally, that obviously we talk about some of the regular ones all the time? Are there any other ones that you kind of have gone into recently, or ones that kind of stand out to you at the moment?
So I listen to gaming podcasts, sports podcasts, and politics podcasts. I'll go through the gaming ones, but yeah, just listen to us, RFN, where it all started, Ready Free Nintendo, Giant Bombcast, Jeff Gersman's show, that's a new one, but obviously him leaving Giant Bomb, he's just a very interesting person, hearing about his experience in the industry, and he does a lot of reminiscing about, he's not into the hotness and the current games in the same way as maybe a lot of other podcasts are. He'll still talk about the current stuff, but getting his insight on the industry when you have as much experience as him is fascinating, and we can all learn from Jeff Gersman for sure.
Yes, absolutely.
Next Lander, Kind of Funny's PS I Love You XOXO, I listen to that. Kind of Funny Gamescast is decent. I love Kind of Funny Games Daily. That's my go-to daily Monday to Friday news show that I listen to. So it's where I get most of my gaming news, other than like Twitter. The MinMax Show is maybe one of my favorite, if not my favorite gaming podcast at the moment. Ben Hansen is a fantastic host, and they're really good at covering, I think, an array of video games. And when I say that, I mean, they'll definitely give a lot of the indies and Nintendo games a lot more limelight than perhaps other podcasts can tend to do. I think sometimes podcasts can be guilty of just covering the big AAA hotness. And I think it's a good example that, for example, they're covering Rabbids. I don't think a ton of podcasts have talked about Rabbids yet, and it's still early days, but that's a good one. Waypoint Radio is the best possible blend of politics and video games, and hearing about the industry and hearing about how awful the industry is generally, and actually someone who will call that out and talk about it in depth is really refreshing on Waypoint, so I'd highly recommend that. The AIAS Game Maker's Notebook is really interesting, just hearing a load of interviews with people inside the industry. I'm always wanting to learn more about the industry, and I think it's something a lot of podcasts are guilty of. It's not their fault, because I think the industry is a very closed box by and large. But getting little tidbits of like how the industry operates and all these things, I think, is valuable. So that's a good one. Retronauts is good for retro stuff. Sometimes they pop up with stuff.
Yeah, also retro stuff is becoming like Game Boy Advance and N64 and stuff that's more our speed now, and they're kind of covering that stuff at the moment, which is nice.
That's a good example that, retro when we were growing up was like, we don't care about these awful NES games. We want to play the modern stuff. But Fire Escape Cast is hilarious. They are a really nice blend of video games and then just general chat. I love Dan Riker, and I think Mary and Mike Mahardy are pretty hilarious. They've got like a really good vibe, the three of them, and I really like their Game of the Year stuff. They're almost like not taken over from Giant Bomb, but they kind of in my mind have become my favorite Game of the Year discussion on the podcasting scape, I'd say, probably.
They basically, and they talk about this on the show, but their show feels like they're just at a bar chatting, basically, and that's what their show is based on, is like them you could go to bars and like chat about stuff.
Yeah, which makes it a lot longer form and more casual and less. And now is the segment where we're gonna talk about this. And
although I do like the way they do their ads now, and they're like Athletic Greens. Yeah, so just like go off on one.
It's like funny. Dan is like the least healthy person perhaps I know in the podcasting universe, and he is like promoting Athletic Greens. It's just so funny to me. Yeah. The podcast called The Game Press. Who's that run by again? I've forgotten his name.
Oh yeah, that's Chris Bratt, who does People Make Games, who are an excellent, I think one of the best kind of gaming YouTube presences. They're almost like documentarians in a way, like similar to NoClip, but they look into like very interesting stories. But the Games Press is a great podcast because like right in my wheelhouse of like just interviews with people from the games media, which is really very good. And Chris used to work for Eurogamer, and he knows a lot of those people and has good insight into like what goes on, but also has the insight from a press side, from traditional press side, but also from a YouTube modern influencer press side. And really good interviews, and that's only monthly, but I think it's one of my favorites as well.
The Kit and Krista podcast, obviously they both got laid off by Nintendo. They did Nintendo Minute.
Yeah.
Like I was saying about the industry being a closed box, that's not the case more so than Nintendo. So they've got a little segment on there where they do like to talk about like stories from inside Nintendo. And obviously they save some of the juicy stuff to themselves, I guess. Yes. But they've got a lot to share. You can learn a lot about Nintendo from listening to their podcast. And they've got a good vibe as well. I think that they will still talk about the current games and talk about non-Nintendo games, which is fun. And so they're fine for that stuff. But the really good stuff that they share is like the industry secrets from Nintendo. And often their podcast has generated a few headlines since it launched. I know, earlier this year, which is quite entertaining.
The thing that I also like about them is that they, they'll pick like a long game to talk about, and then they'll talk about it for like 8 weeks in a row. Like when they were playing Elden Ring, they just do like a little update every week of like, oh, we've played this much more, we got to this point, I'm struggling with this. Like it's kind of like almost journaling in the way that they talk about games, which is nice. Yeah,
which is nice. They're not like, I played 20 minutes of the latest game and now I'm moving on to 20 minutes of the next latest game. It's like, I'm actually gonna beat this game, I think one of them played Elden Ring and the other one played Horizon, which is very similar to us. So these games are long and they wanted to see the end of those, so it's nice. It's actually realistic to talk about games in that way. But that's all the video game ones I listen to. I could go on forever about politics.
And I think the question was mainly about game stuff.
I'll hold for now.
I mean, I listen to a lot of similar stuff that Bally does as well. We have a lot of crossover, and obviously back in the day, I was always recommending like, this show or this show and stuff like that. A couple of recent ones for me that I think are really good is the Backpage podcast, which is if you grew up with UK games magazines and the UK games press. It's hosted by Matthew Castle, who used to work at Endgamer and then Official Nintendo magazine. Also Samuel Roberts, who worked on a bunch of those magazines as well, I think on the PlayStation side, and now works in PR as well. But they basically talk about old game magazine stuff, and they have people on the show from the UK games press and from UK generally games industry stuff, and they just have great banter and a really fun show. But also Matthew has very similar taste to me. He loves Ace Attorney, he loves Xenoblade, and they do like deep dive episodes where they're like, we're just going to talk about this whole franchise, this whole series, almost like a guide to get into it, ranking all the games. Like, and they also do a series where they rank, like they go back in time of like, let's go back to 2009 2009, what are our top 10 games of that year? And they kind of do their rankings as they go through the years. Like lots of podcasts that almost not your traditional with what are we playing, here's the news. Like it's very different. They almost like every episode is this is a retrospective or this is a top 10 or something. Like it's I really like it for that, and it stands out and is different and also has that kind of UK bent to it. So I highly recommend the Back Page. I think that's a really good podcast. And another one is Into the Aether, which I talk about all the time, but I think it is one of the most positive, like uplifting shows on the internet about games, and is just a delight. And I think the two hosts are amazing. The production on it is amazing. And yeah, it feels like just a warm blanket of a podcast that is just
they're kind of where we want to be, right? They're that little,
yeah,
a little bit bigger than us, but they're not in the upper echelons.
Yeah, I mean, you know, they have a great community, and I really like that. I'm very active on their Discord and like chatting with people there, and you know, I've played some Fall Guys with people on that server and stuff. Like it's a really great community and a good bunch of people. And yeah, I really love that show. I think it's probably my favorite games podcast at the moment. So I would highly recommend Into the Aether. It's awesome. And yeah, I think we've covered a lot of the other ones. I still listen to Easy Allies. I actually think obviously Easy Allies have lost a lot of people recently, which is a bit of a shame. But they now have Brad Ellis hosting Frame Trap, and I think that show is even better than it was before. Like he's a really good host for that show, and that's their kind of deep dive into talking about what games they're playing. And I think that show has even got better since Brad became the host, which I think is really awesome to see, because I always love Ben Moore, and it's great. But yeah, I think Brad's done an amazing job on hosting Frame Trap.
Who's all left now?
So Ben left, Brandon left, and Kyle left. So there's Don, Isla, Damiani, Brad, Huber, and I'm missing someone. But there's 6 of them left still.
Okay.
And yeah, and they've got Gabby, who's joined recently, who she is their kind of community person as well. So nice. Yeah, they're still going. And I still enjoy Easy Ally stuff. But yeah, I would say that those are kind of like most of the things. I sometimes listen to Triple Click, which is Jason Schreier's podcast with Kirk Hamilton and Maddie Myers. It used to be a Kotaku podcast, but then they all left Kotaku, so it became.
But they kept the podcast.
They get podcasts, but they're partnered with Maximum Fun. Maximum Fun do like, you know, it's basically the McElroy brothers empire of podcasts, which is just the biggest thing possible, and they're part of that network. And yeah, I listened to their most recent episode because Jason recently played Case of the Golden Idol and talked about it on that episode, so that was fun.
That's really cool.
So yeah, and he's calling it one of his favorite games of the year, so that's really awesome. Also, yeah, if you want another kind of Giant Bomb adjacent podcast, GameSpot After Dark is really good. It's the GameSpot podcast. I've been listening to that since the beginning, and obviously now with Lucy and Timur being on Giant Bomb as well, it's some nice crossover there. And yeah, it's a really good show. Very short, only an hour usually, but like in there, out there, very good banter, very good fun. I love GameSpot After Dark. It's really good. And yeah, and I think the question asked about YouTubers as well. And there's loads. We could just like spend the whole
Game Maker's Toolkit.
Game Maker's Toolkit is amazing. That's probably one of the best channels.
It's maybe my favorite. I follow so few gaming YouTubers consistently, but whenever Mark Brown's videos come out, my God, they're so well edited. He's so well thought through, and
yeah.
I watched last night his video on, I think it was like
Rollerdrome, right?
No, the one before that. It was like, and it's already on 1.2 million views already in just like 4 weeks. It's the one about like issues games had and how they fixed them, and the example they used was Gears of War and
the active reload system.
Active reload and pro players using the active reload and bad players not being able to do it. And then the solution was there's magic bullets at the end of a clip for the more average players, which is just the most clever thing. That made no sense. You got to watch the video. I'm probably magic bullets. Just look up magic bullets Gears of War and you'll see what I'm saying. But it's really fascinating, and he just breaks all that stuff down so eloquently.
Yeah, really, really smart guy. Obviously, very high up my list as well. And, you know, similar stuff, if you want high quality stuff, No Clip and People Make Games, obviously doing documentary work that is fantastic, and highly recommend those channels. I think those are really, really good as well. Yeah, I watch loads of stuff, and I think I've like, having done kind of looking for influencer stuff for work, like there are some people I've come across and be like, oh, they're kind of cool, like I'm kind of into what they do. Like Skill Up is a good example, where I kind of knew of Skill Up before and I'd followed some of his stuff, but he now does a podcast with Lucy James and Gerard the Completionist and Jake Baldino from Game Ranks, which is a really good podcast that I enjoy quite a bit, and that's a YouTube one that I kind of like put on the background sometimes. But Skill Up also featured a couple of our games in his. He does like a weekly news show that gets a lot of views, like 300,000-400,000 views. and he has a segment on there called "Put This on Your Radar," and he featured both The Last Faith and the Entropy Center on that segment. So I'm now biased towards Skill Up because he liked our games. But yeah, I think he does a really good job of breaking things down, and like his videos that like talk about new game releases and his almost like 40-minute reviews are always really well written and well thought out. And I think he does a really good job there as well. So I think he's great. I like Good Vibes Gaming a lot. They're good fun. Obviously, John Cartwright, who was at Nintendo Life, moved over there now, and he does videos that are like laser targeted towards me, which is like, hey, what's the nichest Nintendo thing you could think of, and here's a video I did about it. And I think they're so good.
I think he's also like this very similar age to us,
Yes.
which helps. So he's got a lot of nostalgia for like Game Boy Advance and, you know, systems we really grew up with.
GameCube stuff for sure.
GameCube.
Like there's loads of weird, interesting stuff. He's like, let's talk about this very specific thing on this very specific console, and I'm like, yes, give it to me, I will eat it up. I think he does amazing work on that channel. And yeah, some video essayists are really good as well that I like. Euro Thug 4000, she does like very kind of personal video essays that are very contemplative. Her voice is very soothing and calming. She did a great video on Elden Ring and like the kind of calm and the beauty of Elden Ring, and I think it's like a really excellent video essay. I highly recommend her videos. They're very, very good. And I still like Girlfriend reviews. I think they're very, very funny. I think they have a good kind of like take on things from a kind of comedic perspective, but then they can do like really serious videos that are great. Like their Last of Us video I thought was excellent, like on Last of Us Part 2, that really broke down like why they loved it so much, and I think it's a really, really good thing, as well as people like Jacob Gello, who I think does excellent work video essay wise generally.
Joseph Anderson.
Yeah, I mean, you know, when he ever does videos, but yeah, sure. Joseph Anderson is good. I did watch his Elden Ring video. Somehow he managed to put that out.
Was it as fascinating in equal measures as it was probably annoying?
Oh, of course, yeah, no, totally, yes, always. The master nitpicker is what I would call Joseph Anderson, like absolutely to the nth degree. That's going to happen when you do video essays that are 10 hours long. Like, what else are you going to talk about if not that sort of stuff? Little known person on the internet who I just want to shout out, one Masahiro Sakurai, whose YouTube channel obviously went up recently, which I watch quite often. I think it's really, really fun. It's so cool that he's doing that and like kind of sharing his game design knowledge, even though sometimes he does videos that are like, well, yeah, that was obvious. Sakurai, what are you? He's like, make sure that, you know, your players will enjoy your game. I'm like, okay, I don't know if there's any advice in there, but yeah, he does good stuff. But yeah, as I said, I could keep going on. There are a couple like Twitch streamers that I've gone into as well. Mainly around Xenoblade stuff. So Sarah Key is great. She streams a bunch of games, and she's like a really big fan of the first two Xenoblades, and so I watched her play through a bunch of Xenoblade 3 for certain segments, but then she does edited down versions of her streams on YouTube that are like 40 minutes to an hour, so it basically condenses like a whole chapter of Xenoblade into one video, and she just has great she also just like cries constantly. So like she was like a mess at the end of Xenoblade 2, and like I like Xenoblade 2, but I wasn't like that emotionally invested, and then like I cried at Xenoblade 3, so I was like, oh boy, she's gonna be like an absolute wreck watching Xenoblade 3, and yeah, seeing her reactions to everything that happens in that game is amazing, and I derive a lot of joy from watching people kind of react to those moments in that game specifically. So yeah, she's a very good streamer who I enjoy quite a bit. But yeah, there's tons. We could fill up a whole like 7 hours probably of me going through my list of people that I watch, because there's so many.
If there's one thing we're doing when we're not playing video games, it's consuming content on video games. So this is a real hotspot.
Yeah, I'm just scratching the surface, basically here. But
Super Nintendo games to the Nintendo Switch Online.
Are
there Square Enix games on it currently?
There are some. I mean, technically Mario RPG is one, but is that on? I don't think that's on Switch Online yet, right?
That's not
People
on
are still
it.
wanting it.
We've been meaning to get to that game actually. Yeah, I can't think of other Square Enix games on it.
Yeah, I think like because they have done their Final Fantasy Pixel remasters that are on PC. I don't know when, but eventually Square Enix are going to release those on console.
It's wild because Square Enix was so happy with their games being on the Nintendo Super Nintendo Classic.
Yeah.
And then, I mean, the Classic doesn't have Chrono Trigger, but it does have Final Fantasy VI.
It does, yes.
As well as another Square game of names forgotten.
I think Mario RPG's on that as well.
Yeah, it is on it. That was how we're going to play it. And yeah, so I mean, I'm not intending to replay Chrono Trigger, but it should really come to
It really
It
should.
really should.
Yeah. The one thing is, I think the DS version is just by far the superior version for Chrono
Right.
Trigger. So I don't know how it would be going back to the Super. I'm sure the Super Nintendo version is still great. Obviously, like I think the Super Nintendo version of Final Fantasy VI is great. So I'd fully expect Chrono Trigger to be the same. But yeah, it would be nice to have that. I just feel like Square Enix, they hold these games hostage in a way, and I think they know they can make more money doing collections. We've seen it already on the Switch that a lot of these companies just do collections instead. So yeah, it's hard. I think like more likely it's just getting some of the niche stuff on there. So I'm currently playing Lufia 2 on my Ambinic on the train, and that's like held up as one of the great Super Nintendo RPGs as well. It's really cool. I like Lufia 2 a whole bunch so far, and it almost has that Golden Sun thing of like it's mixing Zelda with an RPG. So like you're doing environmental puzzles of like you're using an arrow to hit a switch to open a bridge, and like you're picking things up and putting them down and like stepping on switches to open doors. Like it's a really nice blend actually of like Zelda dungeon puzzles with RPG combat, and you kind of get into the turn-based stuff as well. So yeah, I would love to see stuff like the Lufia games on there, or even just other Japanese RPGs that didn't get put over or translated. I think that's a lot harder obviously because with games like Puyo Puyo, they can put that on the Super Nintendo and they don't have to worry about translating it. And they're like, oh yeah, it's just the Japanese version. It's on the US and European versions of the app, but you can just play them without too much trouble. Whereas stuff like RPGs is like, well, I kind of need this in English in order to make it work, right? So I think that's a lot trickier of a proposition. But yeah, I'd like to see the Lufia games on that. Of course, I keep banging the door on the Quintet trilogy. Obviously, I've now played Soul Blazer and Illusion of Gaia, and I'm soon to play Terranigma. Someone at work really loves Terranigma and has been talking to me about that, so I want to play that as well at some point. And that is those three games I think would be great for the Super Nintendo Online service, but they also are a nice little trilogy, right? So Square Enix could be like, well, let's package this up and put this out as its own little thing. Actually, I'm not sure if Square has access to those. I'm not sure who bought Quintet or what happened with that company. Maybe the rights are somewhere else and they're kind of hanging about. But yeah, for me, the Super Nintendo, the games that hold up the best have always been the RPG, stuff like Earthbound and Chrono Trigger and stuff like that. So those are the ones I generally am looking for from the service. When it comes to like the big Nintendo stuff, I think they have covered most things at this point in time. Like there are rare exceptions. I mean, original Pilot Wings, right, on Super Nintendo would be nice, I think.
Is that
I don't know if that's on the system. It might be.
I've started a tiny bit of N64 Pilot Wings and it holds up nicely, I think.
Yeah, supposedly they've done like frame rate improvements on it, but apparently that's kind of breaking the game in certain ways. I saw Per Schneider on Twitter talking about that, and I was like, oh, interesting. Maybe Nintendo will have to patch it like they did with Ocarina of Time and the Water Temple boss and that sort of stuff. The Mirror Link fight, I know, has had some issues and people had issues with the emulation so far. But yeah, I definitely think that there's still a whole kind of like mine of stuff that
a bunch of Konami games, which I guess are a similar issue where they want to put out collections.
Yes,
they'd rather not put them on Switch Online.
Yeah, totally.
Like the Castlevanias and
Yep, of course. Loads of those would be hard Contra games. Of course, they've already done collections for. So, yeah, I think that's the big issue. Is like
because Contra would be great. Like the co-op online aspect of Nintendo Switch Online would be so good for Contra. We'd love to play those. So
absolutely, yeah, totally. Especially because the collection itself doesn't support it. So. Yeah, be nice. Nintendo generally, when they like, hey, here's new Super Nintendo games, they tend to be stuff that no one's ever heard of, like, I don't know, Jello Boy or what the fuck that game was. And I was like, all right, I'll play this for like 10 minutes. I was like, yeah, I'm never going to finish this. Or like every caveman game that ever existed, which I still continue to try and go through. But yeah, I do think that there's probably some hidden gems out there that have still just not made it to the service. I'd be interested to know from like a poll perspective, like what are the most wanted games still from players? I would say probably it's Mario RPG at the moment, right?
Yeah.
It's probably the number one that people have said. But yeah, I think there's a lot of good stuff you can still put on there. And I'm still in my process of like getting through the kind of deeper, more kind of like less well-known games from the Super Nintendo catalog. And I think that Nintendo could definitely help that process along. But the question is, like, do they want to put resources into that versus, the subscribers who pay them more money, which is people who get the N64 library and the, the Genesis library.
Yeah, they're doing a lot more promotion on those N64 games. Got Mario Party 1 and 2 coming out. And
yeah, they're both coming out at the same time, right? Like, they're doing a double drop.
November 3rd, 4th, I think.
Yeah, so that'll be fun. Hopefully we can get a game of Mario Party in. I'd love to do that. So yeah, we'll see how that goes.
And then Pokemon Stadium on the horizon. oh my god, we're gonna take on that Elite Four.
Yeah, totally. So that's exciting, but I think, I don't know, it feels like we're getting not to the twilight years of what they're doing with the Super Nintendo Online, but it just doesn't feel like they're caring as much about it, mainly because that's the basic bitch tier, and Nintendo wants you to be on the premium tier almost, you know.
Whatever they do or don't do, I just pray to the Nintendo gods that they can just have this day one on the next Switch, and this constant,
and they don't
drip
reset
feed.
again
Oh my
from the
god.
beginning. They'll be like, hey guys, remember Super Mario World? Now, I know you've not heard of it, but it's a video game. You're going to be able to play it for the first time. It's going to be great. Yeah. Knowing everything we know, that is going to happen. So get ready, everybody.
Yeah. Thanks for your question, Brad. Our next email is from Mike C, who says, hi, Bally and MBZ. I have a problem. I want to play Bayonetta 3 when it comes out, but I've not played Bayonetta 1 or 2, and I want to at some point. Will the polish and new hotness of Bayonetta 3 make the earlier games feel obsolete and unplayable? Will my experience of Bayonetta 3 be worse for not having already played the previous games in the series? This raises the broader question of how sequels interact with earlier games. Are there games which have completely killed off their predecessors? Are there series you really can't get into without starting from the beginning? Nintendo seemed to be reluctant and slow to create direct sequels to games, certainly in comparison to most other game devs. Why do you think this is? Keep up the good work, Mike. And Mike says, P.S. I've just signed up to your Patreon, but might go up a tier if you answer this question. Well, Mike, we sell out all the time, so we will happily and gladly answer your question.
Yes, and appreciate Mike did follow through last time.
He did follow through, exactly. So we've taken the bait.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, really interesting. I think the really interesting assertion that Nintendo doesn't create direct sequels, and I think maybe part of the reason for that is it's harder to jump into a series midway through, right? Like, you think about stuff like Mass Effect. You know, they put Mass Effect 3 on Wii U and expected people to buy it. Meanwhile, the series is built on, like, the whole idea of choice and the whole idea of carrying through save data from previous playthroughs that, like, it just was nonsensical to start a Mass Effect 3, right? Like, that's a great example of a series or a game where you should start at the beginning and you should play through from the start, because otherwise you're not going to know what's going on or anything. And, you know, a lot of kind of Sony games fall into this problem of they are so story driven that they are almost reliant on people having played the first game in order to get into the second, right? And I'm sure you can jump into God of War Ragnarok, but I think like you're not going to get as much out of the experience had you not played the first game. Whereas Nintendo are like Skyward Sword, disconnected, like there's loose connections, but you know, you can just jump in. Breath of the Wild, you know, you can, it just they make it easy for you, but also they have less of a focus on story, so they make it easy for you to just jump in and not actually have to worry about starting from the beginning, in a sense.
I think the loose connections that Nintendo do work really well, and I'll give credit to Sony actually, where I think God of War Reboot in 2018 is maybe the perfect blend, where it's a brand new game with this new setting, and it's still a direct sequel to those previous games, but you can totally play that game having no experience of the previous games while still getting more from the previous games. And so it almost feels to a degree like Zelda's kind of doing that every time, where you can get more out of Zelda if you've played the previous games, but at the same time they are still rebooting it each time, maybe aside from like Breath of the Wild 2 or, you know, Tears of the Kingdom.
Yeah, like there are certain examples, like you've got Spirit Tracks following on Phantom Hourglass, but like narratively, whatever, who cares? And same thing with Majora's Master Ocarina, like there are similar characters who pop up and you'll be like, oh, I recognize that character model from Ocarina, but like really narratively, they're like very loosely connected from a fundamental storytelling. Like every Zelda game is self-contained in its story, and I feel like Tears of the Kingdom Kingdom of Tears, as Valley likes to say.
It's their own fault for naming it so late on in the process. It's like, well, we're going to call it Breath of the Wild 2 forever.
Look, we all got used to Switch after NX, so we're just going to have to get used to this. Tears of the Kingdom, I have no doubt that anyone who is new to the series can jump into that straight away and have no problem whatsoever. Because, like, you know, the story of Breath of the Wild, it's there, but again, it's very light. Like, it doesn't really matter. Whereas God of War is like, well, if you don't know the story going in here, you're probably going to be kind of lost of what's happening, right? Like, it's such a crucial aspect to those games versus what Nintendo does.
And Nintendo generally don't do narratives at all, really. Like, it's very unusual for them to go big on that kind of thing. And
unless you're something like what Monolith Soft does with Xenoblade, where it's a good example of, you know, I do think people can jump into Xenoblade 3 without having played the first two games, but wow, are you going to get so much more out of that game if you played the first two games. Like, massive amounts more of context and just, like, understanding and all that sort of stuff, it just works as a sequel in that way. And I think that's rare, right? Because as you said, Nintendo, they just don't do narrative in that direction usually. And I think, yeah, that's kind of the one standout example of a studio that they do have where it is very narrative focused and it is very story driven. And yes, you can play Xenoblade standalone if you play 3, but yeah, from my perspective, you get so much more out of it.
But what about putting narrative to the side? What about like mechanics? Like say Mike plays Bayonetta 3, has a great time. How is he going to find Bayonetta 1? You know, like how does that change?
I think that's a really important question, right? Because sometimes with series you can play something new and you can fall in love with it and you're like, oh, I want to explore the rest of what this has, and then you go back and you're almost disappointed because it just doesn't hold up in the same way.
Yeah, you really just have to manage your expectations sometimes. Like I went back and played all the Halos, and they're a weird bounce between where I was playing a combination of remakes and re-releases, but then the original game, and I just had to put on my hat of, you know, this is an old game, and take what's good from those experiences, but admit to yourself that there are going to be flaws, and that, you know, hopefully there's flaws. You need something to stand on.
Unless you're playing Bayonetta, in which case
unless you're playing Bayonetta, they don't care about the floor. You're just flying all over the place. But if you just accept that older games have their flaws, it makes the experience so much more fun, because there's just so many older games that do have issues, but the highs are so high, and maybe narrative beats or even mechanics are so great in aspects that, you know, you just kind of have to not lump it, but just kind of appreciate that you might need to lower your expectations a little bit.
Yeah. And if you can, you know, because what you did with Halo is you did play from the beginning. Obviously, like, there are different versions that, like, the way things were remastered and remade and re-put out, it's, like, slightly different between each game. But, you know, the same thing happened to me with Yakuza, right? Where, like, 1 and 2, the versions of 1 and 2 that I played were, like, fully remade. Those were originally PS2 games, and they were remade in a much more modern engine, all that stuff. I got better fighting systems and all that sort of stuff. And then I got to Yakuza 3, and Yakuza 3 is a PS3-ass PS3 game, and they just basically made it HD, essentially. They didn't do any combat improvements or any of that stuff. So, like, that was one of those where, like, I'd had a much more modern experience, but then I got to a middle of the series, and it's like, oh, now I have to go backwards in time to, like, the mechanical jankiness and oldness of this previous one. And it's why Yakuza 3 is the weakest entry in the series for me, just because, like, from a mechanical standpoint, it just doesn't hold up very well. Even though I still like the story, like, it just felt hard. And I think sometimes you'll run into that, right, where, look, I was already sold on Yakuza, and, like, by the second game I'm, like, absolutely bought in, and there was a bit of friction of, like, okay, well, I just need to get through this one to get to the rest of the series, and I want the context. And, like, obviously with a series like that, when it spans multiple decades and, like, characters change and all that stuff, you do want to have the context going forward. So I felt it was important for me to play Yakuza 3, but it would have been nice if that had received the same treatment, you know, as the other game, so I wouldn't have had that kind of friction point. And yeah, I think it's just good to be, as you said, be mindful of that stuff as you're going through. But always, I would say, if you can start with the older, jankier stuff, then probably do that, just because it will be easier for you to, like, enjoy the more modern stuff.
You're getting progression of both. I know that I don't rate the Bayonetta story as I described before, but you would get the progression of the character and the story on top of progression of mechanics, and that might be a nice blend.
Yeah. I guess the other aspect, though, is, like, if you don't want to do that, right? Like, if you don't have the time to do that, then just don't, right? Like, I'm playing Lufia 2 because I read up about it and I saw that Lufia 1 was extremely long and grindy and not very good, not very interesting, and Lufia 2 is where the series got interesting. And I used to be of the opinion, I think, that I'm like, if I'm going to get into a series, I'm going to start from the very beginning, and I have to do everything in order, and it has to be like that. And I've kind of got to a point where, like, there are so many fucking video games in the world. Why do I put myself through an experience that is subpar just to get to something?
There's too much great stuff out there to not experience greatness all the time.
Yeah, and I am loving Lufia 2, and I think it's such a cool RPG that is doing different stuff, and I think it's really awesome, and I'm happy to just play that one and just never go back to the first one, you know, and I think that's totally legitimate, and that totally is fine. Like with The Witcher as well, The Witcher 1 is like a really janky old game, and there's certain aspects that have aged well, but a lot has aged poorly, and so I started with Witcher 2, and then it was one of those interesting things. I think a lot of people were complaining about Witcher 3 at launch, of, like, its combat and how it didn't feel that great. But the funny thing was, going from Witcher 2 to Witcher 3, I was like, oh my god, Witcher 3 feels amazing compared to Witcher 2. So it almost raised my view of Witcher 3 even above a lot of other people, just because I went straight from that into the new game. I was like, wow, this game's incredible. Like, I actually feel like combat's good this time, which is another funny kind of side effect that can happen, right? So if you do want that, and if you have the time to play, again, we're very close to Bayonetta 3, like a week, so if you've got a week to play 2 games, sure, go for it, Mike. But yeah, I do think that there is sometimes that benefit, but equally, I think you're totally fine to just play 3 because, as we talked about, I don't think the story matters in Bayonetta at all. So, like, it's not like you're going to lose out on anything narratively. It might just be that, when you go back to the older games, you'll be like, oh, well, I missed that, smoothness or that kind of like kind of aspect of combat that's not in these older games. But, generally, if you're deep into a series and you enjoy it, I think you can derive enjoyment in different ways, from those older games, and I think it's certainly valid to do that as well. So I don't think we have really given an answer here, to be honest, because I think you can kind of approach it in either way. But yeah, I don't think your experience of Bayonetta 3 will be worse for not having played the previous games. And that one specifically, I don't think it will be worse. I think that there's certainly like benefit to be gained from playing the previous ones, but I don't think it's necessary. And I think, with a lot of modern games coming out, companies always want ways for everyone, as many people as possible, to jump into their game. So they try, I think, often to reduce barrier to entry. Like I've heard with God of War Ragnarok especially, there's a catch-up a thing at the beginning, which basically is a video that shows you, it's like, here's a recap of what happened before, right? I think everyone tries to get you back into things in that way these days, which is good.
What was I playing recently with an awesome recap at the start? I'm trying to remember.
Yeah, certain games do it quite well. The thing I always actually love about games, which is just like while you're still playing them, is games that do when you jump back into your save file, it's like, here's what you were just doing. Like if you had a little bit of a break from it. Cool. AI the Somnium Files, the new Nirvana initiative, that does that when you jump back in, which I really have appreciated. It's helpful especially when you're keeping track of complex plots. Not so important when you're playing Pokemon Fire Red and Leaf Green, which for some reason that game did that as well. I'm like, not sure that I needed to know that I caught this Pokemon in the grass last time, but sure, that's helpful, I guess, in some ways, just to remind me of what I did. But yeah. Any other thoughts, Bally, on kind of like how sequels interact with earlier games and stuff
don't
like that?
burn yourself out on a type of game that might still be good. Like I definitely found Fire Emblem Three Houses a lot more sloggy and boring, but partly because I just played Fire Emblem Fates Conquest, and if you've had your fill of a certain genre and it's not maybe like your favorite genre ever, just maybe be careful not to go back to back. Like a lot of people are playing God of War 2018 now ahead of Ragnarok, and honestly that's kind of dangerous in my view, because as good as that combat is, I would personally, if I played that 25 30 hour game now, going straight into another 30-hour game, that's a lot of that basically, and I'd be nervous about that. So like for example, I want to play the original Spider-Man ahead of Spider-Man 2 next year, and I'm going to make sure I try and play Spider-Man 1 earlier in the year, just so that I'm feeling a bit more fresh before 2.
Yeah, that's always a good thing to do. Again, it can go the opposite way as well, where like me with Yakuza, where I'm like, well, no, this series is now my identity, so I'm just going to play this for the next year. And I didn't burn out on Yakuza. I just played those back to back to back, and I was like, yeah, no problem here. No issues detected. I'm just playing all these in a row, and it's great. And I don't know, maybe it's caught up to me at this point because I'm taking my time through Like a Dragon, but I think that's also because I just have a lot of other games on my plate at the moment, and I'm just trying to clear stuff out. You were pointing out to me at one point, I think you took a screenshot of my backloggery, and you're like, you are a fucking mess. I'm like, yes, I know I am. I'm playing like 19 games. I need to sort my life out. So yeah, that's kind of what I'm in. I'm in kind of cleanup mode at the moment, which I cleaned up 3 games last weekend, which is I'm happy about. So
that I did see that on Twitter. It was like bam, bam, bam.
Yes,
boom, there we go.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm getting there. I'll be okay. But yeah, I want to clean things out. I've got like 3 weeks off in December, so I think I'm probably gonna just like burn through Yakuza and Final Fantasy 14 in December and just do
make a
nothing
Game
else.
of the Year video. Yeah,
that too. Yeah, that's gonna be a fun thing. But thank you very much for the question. Appreciate it, Mike. And yes, Bally, do you want to remind people where they can send the emails if they do want to send them in?
Please send them to ThisNintendoLife@gmail.com. That's ThisNintendoLife@gmail.com. And
yes,
that wraps up the show.
It does indeed. So let's get on out of here. Obviously, we have some people to thank who have supported us on patreon.com/ThisNintendoLife, where you can go to get bonus episodes and other stuff. Bally, who would we like to thank?
We'd like to thank our 2 new patrons. As mentioned, Mike C, thank you for your brand new patronage, and also another new patron, Noah. Thank you so much for your support. But we'd also like to thank our $10 tier patrons. They are Zach S, Thomas, Matthew, Albert, and Wicked Gamer UK Alan. Thank you all for your $10 tier support. It's hugely appreciated. And thank you to all of our other patrons. We're building quite a nice little number now of them. So thank you to all of you out there for what you contribute to the show. It's hugely appreciated.
Absolutely. Awesome stuff, as always. And I want to give a shout out also to Atari Alex, who had supported us at $10 for an extremely long time. Very, very long time. And has dropped down. But that's all cool. Absolutely fantastic. And really appreciate that.
Yeah, if you want to drop in and pay for a few months and then drop out again, that's totally cool. It's totally up to you how you want to treat the tiers.
Yep, and please do not go beyond your financial situation if it is not something you can do. It's always optional, and we really appreciate people who are able to support the show. But yeah, please don't go beyond your means if you can't. But anyway, obviously you can find us across the internet in various different spots and places. We're on twitter.com, hellscape, and it's fun. I like it there. The temperature is nice. You can find me at LordNBZ. Where can they find you, Bally?
I'm on Twitter at Ballyman91. That's BALLYMAN91.
Wonderful stuff. You can find the podcast Twitter at TNL Podcast, and you can go there for updates about the show and what's happening, as well as our Patreon episodes and like extra stuff that we're doing. So go check that out. You can also join our Discord community, which is great. Lots of people chatting in there. And you can also obviously find us on YouTube. The show goes up on YouTube as well, alongside the podcasting app version. And we'd love to get some more reviews as well. Apple Podcast reviews are great. Spotify reviews are great. Wherever you listen, if you have a way to review us, that's always appreciated. It just means that more people see the show and more people are able to kind of maybe listen and find it and be like, hey, I like these people. I like listening about Nintendo. It's a good time. So yeah, that would be really appreciated. If you're able to review us anywhere, go ahead and do so. And yeah, I think that pretty much is it in terms of stuff we are doing. Hello.
How are you going to beat Rabbids and play Bayonetta 3 and all in time for God of War Ragnarok? How are you gonna balance this?
So you bring up a good point. It's important.
On top of that long list of games you're already playing that I screenshotted a while back.
Yep, I'm I think 16 hours into AI the Somnium Files Nirvana Initiative.
How long is that game?
30, so another 15 of that, easy. I've got Yakuza, probably another 40 hours of Yakuza. I still have probably 300 hours of Final Fantasy 14. I manage my time fine. I'm okay.
Yeah. You can throw Elden Ring back in my face. You're perfectly entitled to do that.
Yeah, I can, and I will. I will throw it back in your face. Absolutely. I'll figure it out. I've got a couple days I can take for long weekends this month, or next month, after we've launched our second game of the year. Very nice. And then I will have my long time over Christmas, where I can hopefully catch up on some stuff. But
sounds like a good plan.
It sounds like a good plan. I hope it works out. But yeah, we'll definitely be talking about Bayonetta 3 next time, and then we're going to get into November, where I'm sure a little game called Pokemon is going to pop up as well, which I'm interested in.
I didn't even include Pokemon on my list. That's another game to get to.
So yeah, fun stuff all around. Looking forward to chatting about it. And thank you everybody for listening. As always, we'll be back in a couple of weeks' time with another podcast to talk about video games and Nintendo and stuff. Until then, thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye, folks. The musical interlude used on today's show was Tomorrow Is Mine from Bayonetta 2, copyright Platinum and Nintendo 2014.